Welcome to Rooted in God's Love, the masterclass series for Christian women who desire to feel the Father's unconditional love, get grounded in their true identity in Him, and courageously pursue their God-given purpose. I'm your host, Alana, and I use biblical truths and cognitive behavioral therapy to help women be fully rooted in who they are in Christ, love who God created them to be, and wake up joyful every day living out their kingdom purpose. And today I am very excited to introduce you to Dr. Michelle Lappin. Michelle is a certified wealth coach who developed a passion for encouraging, equipping, and educating women and families who are fed up and frustrated with their finances after she climbed out of her own financial pit. As a mom and an Army veteran, she understands what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck and being stuck under that mountain of debt. Michelle has gone from being a high school dropout to being nearly complete with a doctorate of business administration. Most importantly, Michelle is a believer in Christ, and he provides her the strength and the guidance that she needs daily to do what she does. Welcome, Michelle. I am so glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I love being able to encourage others with my story, and thank you for that opportunity today.
Well, and the beautiful part about your story and what you're going to talk about today is overcoming the impossible, which I think is such a good fit for you because, in a sense, in your life, you have a beautiful story of how the Lord helped you overcome the impossible. So maybe before we dive into this topic, you can tell us a little bit about your story and what brought you to the point of doing the work you do now.
So, in order to explain a little bit about my story, I feel it's necessary to go back quite a few years to stuff that's not even related to finances. Mostly because that was where the foundation was, that kind of started my the strength mindset, the process of knowing that I can overcome the impossible no matter the situation. And that was the moment that I decided to leave high school halfway through my senior year. There were some things that happened prior to that that led me to a place where I felt like I really didn't have a choice. And I fled the state, so to speak. And I had to start over, um, mostly on my own. And I didn't know what I was doing, where I was going to end up, or who I was going to become. But I had to put my big girl britches on and just take it one day at a time. And I literally just took every step I possibly could to continue to improve my future. And through that, I over overcame multiple things from my past, which includes financial things. I ended up in this situation where I joke about it sometimes because I tend to be a very clumsy person. I was that kid that was always tripping on things, always falling down for no reason, like all of that. And I literally in life walked right into a financial pit. And I say I walked right into that financial pit because there were decisions that I made that caused me to be in that place. Now, I will caveat that and say that I know that there are some situations, some people that have stuff happen to them, and there is no getting around it. And I feel for you 100%. I feel for you, and I'm sorry. And I want you to know that there is still a way out. But there are also some of us that have things that we learned from our childhood, habits that we developed throughout our adult lives, our young adult lives, that landed us into a situation that we didn't necessarily intentionally plan. And really, it was just because of the decisions we made. And that's what happened to me. There were things that I did with my finances that were because of what I learned or a habit I developed over time, like spending habits is one of them. And basically, these things landed me in pit, a financial pit where I was facing homelessness, foreclosure, and bankruptcy. And I found myself sitting in a food bank for the first time in my life. And I was literally like tears running down my face. And I looked up and I did what people always say you don't do. And I asked God, why am I here? What did I do to deserve this? I literally said to him, I'm a good person. Why do
Mm.
I deserve this?
And you know what? That is so common. Like, I think you are definitely not the only one who says, why is this happening to me? God, I'm a good person. Absolutely. Very familiar with that.
Yeah, I mean, and who am I to say that in the first place?
Mhm.
Like, I know, like, yes, many of us are good people, and sometimes things just happen. But for me, he just gently nudged me to let me know that it was the choices that I made that landed me in that place, which was hard to swallow. But because God is so great and so amazing, he also stood by me and showed me how to walk out of that.
Mm.
It took
Beautiful.
patience, it took dedication, it took a little bit of sacrifice. And I am now sitting in the place where I say I am nearly debt free, only because I do still have student loans that I'm paying off, but everything else is paid off outside of my home, which I just purchased another home 2 years ago. And they say that it's nearly impossible. I actually have a VA loan, and I was told when I lost the other house that I wasn't going to be able to get another VA loan, and that is not accurate.
Mm.
Um, but it was 7 years ago, 7 years ago that the first home was let go of. And it was about 5 years later, I was able to purchase again, debt free for the most part, savings built up. And now I am teaching, encouraging, and equipping other people to avoid what I had to walk through.
Mm. Yeah, that's beautiful.
That
It's like God has given you this ability to understand where other people who are in that position are at, like to empathize with them and then help
mm,
them move through it. And I'm curious because these are some massive shifts in your life that God gave you. He
mm,
gave you this revelation that there was some responsibility on your part for what had happened, very gently and lovingly sort of taught you what it was and how to move through it. And what would you say it was the biggest factor in you literally transforming from this person who was in so much debt, who was sitting at a food bank, to now where you are today?
so I'll tell you, the one thing that was the most transforming for me is the thing that I hear the most from people that they don't like.
Mm.
And that simply is budgeting.
Mm-hmm. Who
Like,
likes that, right?
I get it. Nobody likes it. It's sometimes it can be challenging if you don't understand it or don't have the best method, and there's so many different ways to do it. And it just takes time, and nobody wants to do it, and you're sitting there. One thing was, sometimes I would not be certain on what was going on with my finances, and I'd be afraid to even sit down and look at anything because I was afraid that it was going to be disastrous.
Mm,
And if I was budgeting, then I wouldn't be so afraid of doing that because I would know where my money was going and I would know what I was spending my money on.
hmm. Yeah. What would you do? Like, so you're budgeting, you've got this budget planned out. I think like people have these ideas that they're going to budget and they're going to only spend this much money on this many things. And then all of a sudden they see that bright, shiny object that they want. And then they get out their credit card and they swipe it and buy that thing because we're an instant gratification race,
Mhm.
right? We,
Yep.
that's what we are, right? As humans. So what would you say to somebody who is struggling with that kind of thing? They have a budget, they have good intentions, but then it all goes out the window.
So for me and where I was at when I started this whole process, it was very different because I was in a place where I had $100 a month for groceries, and that's why I was going to the food bank, because I was like, I don't, I gotta eat more, and I don't have enough money to feed myself or my son for the whole month, right? On top of meeting the bare necessities of bills. I had no spending money. I was barely putting anything in savings because there wasn't much to go around. So when little things came up that I wanted, I had to make a choice. What do I want to have this pleasure now and pay for it later? Or do I want to go ahead and make that sacrifice? And I hate to use the word sacrifice because it comes off as negative. Like, it's not really a negative. It's not a you can't have it. It's a hold off for now. Like,
Mm,
it's all about how you view it. It's not about, you can never have that thing. It's deciding, let me hold off right now so that in 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever it is, I can have that thing and enjoy it with peace of mind.
yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny because at our church, we've been doing the Fruits of the Spirit series, and the last
Mm,
one is self control. And yesterday, my pastor was talking about the fact that self control is putting off what you want now for what you want most. And I
yes,
love that because
yes,
it's so true, right? Like, what do we really, really want? What are those big
yes.
goals? What are we saving up for? What's important to us,
Mhm.
right?
Yep. And one of the things that I did during that season was the simplest thing for me. And I really think that if we start to do this a little bit more, it actually, like, we'll start to appreciate it more. But I had a list, like, how you can have to-do lists and stuff. So it was similar to that. And I had it on my fridge. And whenever there was something that I kind of wanted for the home, or something that I felt like I kind of needed, but it wasn't like an emergent need, I would write it down on this little notepad that was on my refrigerator. And when I had a little bit of extra money, I would take a look at that notepad, and I also prioritized the items that I wrote down. Like, okay, this is more of a need versus a want, even though, like, trash bags. If I was running low on trash bags and I needed to get some more trash bags soon, I would write it down on the list, because the next time I went to the grocery store, if there was a little extra amount, then I would go ahead and get a big box of trash bags that would last me for 6 months or a year. And then I'm not worried about getting trash bags every couple of months, right? Or if there was some other household item or something that I wanted for myself in general, I would write that down. And I found myself appreciating these things when I got them more, because I planned for it.
Yeah, instead of just grabbing it, not really thinking about it, which I think a lot of us do. Like, I'm guilty of this for sure. I go to the grocery store and I go to Costco and I see that thing that I probably don't really need, but I'm like, oh, that blanket's so nice. Like, I should get that.
Mhm,
Or that towel, that beach towel is really cute. I should get it for my daughter. We don't need those things. We have lots of towels and blankets,
mhm.
but it's easy. And it's not, I mean, a lot of times I end up taking the stuff back because I think, well, when I was there, I really wanted it. But then I realize when I get home, I don't need it. Doesn't matter if it's on sale. But
Mhm.
I think that what you said is so true, where we appreciate those things that we really save up for, and then we consciously invest in them, right? And I think, one thing we've talked about before is this idea of planning and preparing.
Mhm.
So how can somebody go through a process of actually, kind of like you did, where they want to do what you're doing, they love the insight you're giving, and they think, okay, yeah, that would make sense for me. How do they plan and prepare so they don't have those moments at the store where they're like, oh, that looks so amazing, I should grab that right now? What if it's not here? Costco's famous for that. What if it's not here when I come back in a week, right? What would you say to those people?
So the first thing I would say is to make your list before you even go to the store. Make, like, if it's a grocery list, or if it's, somewhere else, make a list before you even go to the store. I literally, when I started doing all of this a couple of years ago, I would not just make my list. I would say how much, because I started paying attention when I was going to the grocery store on how much certain items were. So I started to notice like, okay, a pack of chicken is going to cost me around $10. The family pack of chicken is going to cost me around $10. A gallon of milk was going to cost me about $2.50, like things like that. I would start to notice those things the more that I was paying attention to it. So I started writing down the list of things that I needed, excuse me, the things that I needed first and how much they were, and made sure that it was under what my budgeted amount was for my groceries. The other thing I did was I made two separate lists, one for groceries and one for what I call supplies, which is like your toiletries, household cleaning supplies, that kind of stuff. So it was two separate lists. Now, when I went to the grocery store and I checked out, I didn't check out two different lines. I didn't do two different purchases. It was all together, but it kept me like, this is my toiletries and supplies. This is my groceries. It was two separate budget items and two separate lists. Sometimes on the same paper, but just a way to separate it to give that perspective of how much I was actually spending on those items. Mm-hmm. So when I was making the list, I would write down how much I thought each one of those things was going to be and made sure that everything totaled to under my budget. More often than not, at the end of checking out, I would often have $10, $15 at least left over after that, because I didn't necessarily factor in any coupons or discounts, because it just kind of, sometimes the store just has discounts that you're not expecting, and that's amazing, right? Mm-hmm. And then also, because I was sticking to my list more than anything, I wasn't tempted to just grab things that I passed by on the shelf. The other thing, there's two other simple things that I did. I also found a calculator thing. I forget what the name of it's called, but basically allows you to type in all of the prices of the items in the calculator at the grocery shopping calculator or something like that. And it helped me keep track of the prices of the items, and it also calculated the sales tax. So when I went to the checkout, I knew approximately how much it was going to be, and I made sure it was under my budgeted amount. The other thing that I did was tried my best to stay out of the middle aisles, mm-hmm. and limited my eyesight when I was in the checkout aisle.
Yes, because that's actually the healthy way too, right? Because all the healthy stuff is around the perimeter, and yep. all the unhealthy stuff is in the middle and yep. in the checkout line, right?
Yep. Yep. And it's hard, especially if you have little ones that you're taking with you. It's hard. So like, Mom, can I have this? Can I have that? And it's like, feed them before you go. Have a snack in your purse.
Yeah, I always say, it's funny because my daughter's 5. So I always say, like, luckily there's almost always another special occasion coming up, you know, whatever mm-hmm. it may be, Valentine's Day, Easter, or a birthday or something. And so I'm like, oh, sweetie, maybe for Easter, or maybe for Valentine's Day, or maybe for your birthday, you can have that. So now she knows, we go to the store and she's like, Mommy, can I have that for my birthday? And it actually is great training, because now she doesn't even ask for anything. But I think that's so true. Like planning the expectations with your children, right? Because, having a child, right, how difficult it can be to maintain their expectations, because they're even more instant gratification than we are as adults, right? Oh, yeah. So that's that planning and preparing aspect, I think, is so important. And then the whole idea around, I'm thinking of willpower, because willpower, it always has, this energy around it, as far as like, if you have willpower, you're strong, but if you don't, like, you'll fail, right? And I'm thinking about God and how that plays into this whole idea of, we want to create a budget. We want to honor him with our money. We want to honor him in lots of different ways. But, financially, we hear in the Bible things like, the love of money is the root of all evil. And you're talking about money as a Christian, which I think is so powerful, because a lot of people have, preconceived ideas around money, right? So my question to you is, first of all, like, how do you honor the Lord with your money? And how does abiding in him more, or being rooted in him more, affect your ability to, like, have that willpower, that strength in those difficult situations?
So I have a couple of thoughts on this. Um, you're right. The Bible does say the root of all evil is the love of money. It's not money that's the root of all evil, it's the love of money. So I'm glad you brought that up because we tend to get that a little bit confused. Um, it's what we're focused on, right?
Mhm.
Um, the word of God also does ask for your tithe, which is 10%. I ensure to the best of my ability that my 10% always goes first. Now, I personally have a certain perspective that others may not necessarily agree with. My tithe is not just solely to my local church. I have another organization that I give to as well that is encompassing of that. And that was something that I prayed about, and I felt like God gave me the peace to do that. It what I believe his word says, is obedience is greater than sacrifice, right? So it's not so much about what you're doing, it's about the heart in it.
I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I will be honest and say that when I went through that financial pit, it was really hard. There was literally no way that I was going to be able to initially do that 10% and actually, pay my rent and eat. Like, and I had a car payment at the time, and it was really hard. Like, I literally went down to the bare minimums. Unless I was staying with somebody else and, renting a room for $400, there was no way I was going to be able to do it all. So I did what I could, and I worked my way up.
Yeah. Well,
And
and I think that's a powerful lesson for people because like you said, like he wants us to give with a joyful heart,
yes.
right? And I know in my experience, I didn't become a Christian until I was 30. And I remember going to the church where I became a Christian for a number of months, and they were talking about tithing, and I'm thinking I didn't know what it meant because I just had never done it. So
Mhm.
I remember putting my first $5 in the basket when it came by, and I remember feeling so joyful about that, and it grew. Right, every week I gave $5,
Mhm.
which was that was like a percent or less of what I was making, but I was joyful in doing it, and I was just getting to know the Lord, right? And as
Mhm.
time went on, it grew to 10%, and now we got married, and I remember that first year of marriage, it was really tough. I I struggled to tithe that first year. And I thought, well, we could use that money. Like we need that money.
Mhm.
And we chose to give it. And it was beautiful because maybe you've experienced this too. Even when we think that we don't have enough money, even when we think we're at the end of our rope, if we're faithful
Yep.
in what the Lord is asking us to do in whatever way it looks like I love that you prayed about it and you asked him and you felt peace about it and you felt that you were being obedient to him. So whatever that looks like for people, they will get the experience, possibly like me and maybe like you, and you can tell us a little bit about this, but where God will just abundantly bless more than we could ever ask or imagine, even financially, in a time when we think, okay, I don't know, I remember not knowing how ends were going to meet certain months, and yet we always had an overflow and it was beautiful. So have you experienced the same thing?
So many things. Like, I could tell you about five different stories off the top of my head of situations that happen. I just simply share something that I used to do often in the very beginning of climbing out of that pit was praying, going, okay, God, I've done this budget and I'm trying to stick to, my spending habits, or my spending limits, things like that. And I'm barely gonna make it, Lord. I don't know how this is gonna work out, but I'm just gonna trust you. And I had enough to where I could do the 10%, but it was literally like I had no spending money, right? None. And throughout the month, people would offer to take me out to lunch and pay for my lunch. I had a lady in my church walk up to me one day and hand me a check and say, God told me to give this to you. And it was $500. And I
Wow.
was like, what? And then I had situations where at the end of the month, I look at my account and I look at my spending, and I didn't spend all of my gas that I had budgeted. Somehow I didn't drive as much and there was more money left over. And my electric bill was less than what I had thought it was going to be. So that was money saving there. Like there were things like that that happened all the time because one, I was faithful, but two, I was also paying more attention to what was going on. So there was actually a little bit more money left over than I realized. And then I was able to put that money in savings.
Mm, that's beautiful. I love it. Like I love those stories of when we just trust and in faith we do what he's asking us to do and then we see the blessings of it, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, that's amazing. So how has being rooted in God's love, like really, because this is the name of the masterclass series and the whole idea is, what happens when we're really rooted in him? So from a financial perspective, what would you say has been the biggest, let's say, transformation in you or change in you when you have really been solidly connected with him?
The biggest change, or I guess I'm trying to figure out the right word to use, so to speak, but the most impactful thing to me is something that I walked through, something that I felt and experienced. But a friend of mine few years later shared with me that she kind of had a similar experience, and God said these words to her. God didn't say these words to me; it was to her, but I felt it on a very deep level because it's exactly what I walked through. It's exactly how I felt. And I'm going to frame it as a question. Um, if if you put somebody else in the position of managing your money and they managed it the way that you're managing it right now, would you be satisfied? Would you be satisfied? See, it's not our money. It's God's money, and he gives us the ability to earn it. He gives us the freedom to decide what to do with it. He literally made us the CEO of the money. It's up to us to decide how we're going to manage it. And at the end of the day, are we going to be satisfied with how we managed it when we think about if somebody else was doing it the way we were?
Mm, yeah. What comes to mind when you're talking is stewarding it well. Like
Yeah.
any gifts he gives us, any blessings he gives us is like, are we stewarding that blessing well? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would like I understood what she meant when she said that, because I was like, that's exactly what happened to me. It was like, okay, God, you showed me I was not doing this well. I was not doing this in a manner that was actually fruitful for me and for my future. And you're placing this blessing in front of me to earn income and decide what I want to do with it. You're doing that for me.
Hmm.
And I was just kind of like wasting it. I wasn't like the oh, I hate when this happens.
Trying to think of something and you can't
the
think of it.
the scripture about the word talents, the talents,
The parable of the talents. I was thinking about
yes,
that one. Yes.
the parable of the talents. Like I literally was the person that just buried it. Like I don't even know if I buried it. I think I went and spent it somewhere. Like that's the way I was living. But instead, we can be living like the one that was given the 10 talents.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
get to choose.
What was your biggest takeaway from that parable as far as it relates to how we manage our money?
We get to choose. We get to choose. I mean, we can bury it and just be like, here you go, I'll give you back what you gave me. or we can do something beneficial with it. We can do something that's fruitful with it. And that doesn't necessarily mean investing it in everything. It means managing it well, stewarding it well. And we can multiply it 10, 100 times, sometimes even more than that.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's like if we're faithful to the master, right? If we're faithful to God, then we can absolutely with him, right? Because in many ways he wants us to have the abundant life, right? It's not just that he wants us to have an abundance of cash, floating around all over the place, but he wants us to have abundant joy, abundant peace, right?
Mhm.
And abundance can look like having our needs met, right? He's our protection and our provision. However, money does help. When we have more money, we're able to give more,
Mhm.
right? I think about that. Money used to be a topic that I was terrified to talk about. I didn't want to charge money for anything I did. I was scared to talk to people about money. I mean, you probably encountered this when you work with people, right? I didn't think,
Oh yeah.
as a Christian, I shouldn't be charging people money. I should just do this all for free and give away my services, until I
Yeah.
realized there's transformation in the transaction, right? There's transformation in when we put money into something that we invest in, or we tithe our money, or we give it back to God in a way that he's asked us to, right? There are so many ways that can like look, right? And so I remember, and I think a lot of people struggle with this, is we hear blessed are the poor in spirit, but really people kind of take this idea and say, well, I don't need to have a lot of money, like I can just kind of live as a pauper. But the truth is, I think as Christians, when we are in a place to make money, if we're good servants and we steward it well, we will end up giving it back to God. We'll give it to the church. We'll give it to worthy
Mhm.
causes. And I think that's a really amazing place to be, where you actually can give back, right? And then bring that abundance into other people's lives, right?
Yeah, it's interesting that you're bringing all this up, because I was just thinking about something a few minutes ago and I was like, how is this going to tie in there? And you just literally walked me right into it. So, we don't think about this very often in this regard. I don't think I've actually really ever heard a sermon on it, nor a discussion on it. But I realized it sometime last year. I was talking to my business coach. She's a Christian and she's a business coach, and she kind of brought me this question on, well, how, like, from a Christian perspective, um, she was getting ready to run an ad on like fulfilling your God dream.
Mm,
And it's basically asking for their business, asking them to pay money to help them to fulfill their God dream, right? And she's like, how do you, like, what do you think about when you see this? And I was like, well, here's the thing. The Proverbs 31 woman was a businesswoman.
mhm,
She worked with her hands. She made things for her family. She made things that were sold in the marketplace, and she brought income into her household, and she was called blessed because of that.
mhm.
So God is not against us using our skills that he gave us to make money, especially if we're going to be using that to bless the kingdom even more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's such a great point. And that's such a great way to end this off, because I think you've given people so much to think about as far as money goes. So, Michelle, if you're going to leave people with one last piece of advice or actionable step, what would that be?
Last piece of advice is something that I have been saying for probably about the last year and a half, because of what I have walked through. And it's truly what I believe deep down. And that is, no matter how deep the pit you find yourself in, you can always rise above and go further than you ever envisioned.
Mm, yes, and I love that, because it kind of brings things full circle again to where you started and where you
Mhm.
are now. So that is absolutely beautiful. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your wisdom and your experience and your insights with our audience. Michelle, thank you so much. And those of you tuning in, be sure to catch the next masterclass on being deeply rooted in God's love. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. If you connected with this content and it helped you in some way, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, check the description below for special gifts just for you. See you in the next video.